Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us. Hope that you can hear us. I will be pleased to explain some of the findings we achieved with this project together with my colleague Dr. Zoppi. If you can show the next slide, please. You will see the team. Next slide, please. Yeah, here is you can see the team. Now, yeah, no, the before. You jump to watch. Before, yes, just to watch. Before this one. Yeah, yes, exactly. No. The next slide only, one slide. I wanted just to show very briefly the team that worked with us. The University of Bologna was, so if you can change the slide, please. The University of Bologna was the leader of the consortium that organized this presentation. I'm insisting if you can change the slide, please. Okay, thank you so much. Yes, you can see here the partners that work with us, the Central European Initiative, the European University of Tirana, a laboratory of demography, the University of Tessel in Greece, and the Institute for East Central Balkan Europe. This was the team, in addition to some individual experts from Hungary, in particularly from Brussels, and we had the pleasure to work not only for ESPON, but also with the stakeholders, and particularly with the region Emilia-Romagna, which was the leader stakeholders that raised the questions that we had to develop with this project. Next slides about the project. Next one. Yes, as you can see, among the main aims, we had to make a comparative analysis on the flows, migration flows in two macro regions, the Adriatic Ionian and the Danube macro regions, because the two macro regions are in some way interconnected. And by including also two countries of interest, as we called, that is Kosovo and North Macedonia, because at that time North Macedonia was not yet part of the Adriatic Ionian macro region as it is today. So this is the area that we had to cover. As you can see, is an area that focus the interest particularly to Southeast Europe, not necessarily only the, let's say, the Mediterranean route that involved directly Italy through the Mediterranean Sea, but also the Adriatic area and the Southeast, including the so-called Balkan route. So this was also part of the fact that the University of Bologna has a strong connection with Southeast Europe, and we have also part of a large network of universities called Uniadrion, which is the network of the University of the macro region, of the Adriatic Ionian macro region. So what was within this framework, our main task was to understand which kind of challenges and opportunities were related to the refugee and migration flows in the two macro regions, considering in particular the impact of migration into the territorial cohesion of this area, which suffer from many shortcomings. I mean, particularly depopulation, local migrations, and so on and so forth. So this was an aspect that we wanted to analyze in depth. Next slide, please. This is just shortly the background of the whole project. We had to take into consideration several obstacles, starting from the fact that the data were not compatible and it was not easy to compare because the way our data were collected were based on different methodology. There were also political and economic and social cultural obstacles related to the peculiarity of the regions. And we have also focused on different flows of migrations. But as it was asked for this meeting, we will focus only on one of these flows, that is the external migration, the transit migration across the macro-regions, rather than to focus on also on the internal migration in each countries or into the region or other secondary movement related to the coming back of the migrants into the macro regions when they were denied the entry into the countries that were of their interest to join in Central Europe and in Northern Europe. So we will focus on external migration to the macro region and the countries of interest in such a way that I will now give the floor to Dr. Zoppi, who will enter into the details about the maps that also we have prepared for showing you some of the outcomes of our research.
Thank you, Professor Bianchini. I am ready now to continue the presentation. As it was mentioned, I will deal with the presentation of data and maps that we have collected and created for the ESPON target analysis. If you are familiar with this kind of research, you know that data and map evidence is what ESPON is trying to produce in order to inspire policy making. So among the first things I will show you is a series of maps where you can see the countries of origin of first-time asylum seekers during the period 2015 to 17, exactly to show you very graphically, very easy, what kind of migration flows took place during these years. So the first map concerns Greece, where you can see the origin of the asylum seekers from countries where at least 1,000 applications were recorded during the 3 years. So not the entire list of countries, but only those with at least 1,000 applicants in between 2015 and 17. Well, the evidence is rather clear. You see the impact of the Balkan route and the origin from the Middle East going to Central Asia. You can see Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan. This is the kind of countries where most asylum seekers came from. If you move to the next slide, you can see that from an entry country as Greece of the Balkan route, if we move to a transit country as Hungary has been, you can see the impact of the Balkan route is still very important. It's like continuing the same flow of people from the entry points to one of the transit countries, trying to reach the destination countries that were in Central and Northern Europe. We can move to the next slide to see the case of Italy, which I will say that is both a destination country and a transit country to other EU countries. You can see how the picture changes, actually. You see still part of Central Asian and Middle East origin of asylum seekers, but you see how West Africa in particular is now important. Nigeria and Mali, for example, are very represented countries in terms of applications of asylum seekers. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the EU28 situation in the same period of time. Well, the red balloons, as in the previous map, indicates the origin and the magnitude of people that applied for asylum. You can easily recognize the prevalence of Syria and some of the other countries like Pakistan and Iraq, they were mostly represented. But you can start to spot an interesting evidence, which is the representation of the Balkan countries. So you can see a number of red balloons that are relevant also there. You have to think that the fourth group of asylum applicants were from Serbia and Kosovo, for example, put together, and the fifth group was from Albanian applicants. Next slide. When we zoom in a bit on the first-time asylum seekers in the European space, we get this map where the pink color represents Germany, which was the top receiver countries of application in the same period, 2015-17. You can also spot the big size of Turkey, of Greece, of Italy, of Sweden, France, even Hungary. But there is also another evidence that I want to attract your attention on, which is, again, the Balkan countries of the macro region as well. And you can see that basically the kind of evidence we get is that these countries were not attractive for asylum applicants. So they consider these countries to be transit in order and instrumental to reach Northern and Central Europe, which we combine with a number of other data, for example, on policies and application policies for asylum seekers, in order to understand a bit of what are the differences at the regional level within the European space. Next slide. Here, again, we zoom in a bit more on the context, so you can see the flow of asylum seekers, those who applied during the year that are indicated, 2008-15. It's important to mention that those countries on the right side, at least on my screen, so Germany, Italy, Hungary, Greece, and Austria, altogether attracted some 95% of all applications are recorded in those years. That means almost 2 million, around 2 million. When we looked at the countries that are on the left side, so starting from Bosnia, going down to Bulgaria, we are considering around 70,000 or 6-7% of the total applications. So here you can really grasp the importance of regional differences and the kind of relevance that variables policies have in determining what is going on with migration flows. Next slide, please. One more. So here is just the last kind of data evidence that I wanted to tell you in this brief presentation. That is what happened with applications. The Balkan route was not just participated by third country citizens, but even citizens of the Balkan countries themselves. They actually made part of it. Some 15% of all applications registered in new countries in that period came from citizens from countries on the Balkan route itself. So you can see a bit of this evidence here. You can see that they basically followed the same trend. So when the migration peak came around 2015, also the applications from citizens of the 6 Balkan countries here mentioned was achieved. The same kind of peak of people applying in some of the core Central and Northern European countries. You can see Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Germany, France, Italy, the Netherlands, and Sweden. But what is also another important evidence there is that the rejection rate for citizens of the West Balkan countries was very high, even 100%, because this area was considered to be safe at that time and still is. So this last slide that I wanted to show you explains that the Balkan route was a major phenomenon that involved also Balkan citizens that saw the route as an opportunity to improve their conditions. So now I'm giving back the words to Professor Bianchini to show a bit of the case studies and, most important, the recommendation we had from the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Yes, thank you so much. This is just a very short presentation of the different case studies that we have scrutinized during the research. As you can see, they show different contexts, from Greece to Hungary, from Italy to Serbia. All these and Western Balkans, all these cases were different because what appeared clear to us was that the context and the territorial context were different and reacted different to the flows, to the migration flows and the request of the asylum seekers. Next slide, please. Yeah, here you have some of the recommendations that we have elaborated on the basis of the research that we have done, and later on also you can see also the recommendation in the next slide that is stemming from the case studies. But basically, what is emerging is on the one hand, the need of establishing databases that were comparable and compatible, mutually compatible, in order to get as much as possible information about the not only the flows but the skills of each of the migrants. This is another key point. In fact, we know very little about the skills of immigrants. And this is, however, very important in order to estimate their employability in local markets and how to manage migration accordingly. What we have discovered is mainly that it is possible to consider that the fact that our area, I'm speaking about the broader Southeast Europe and including Italy, so the Adriatic Ionian macro-region, as territories that were abandoned, or as particularly in the rural areas or in the forests, where in fact we need people, for instance, even for environmental protection and for intervention in order to control the waters, just to give you an example. So all these elements encourage us to see that there is an opportunity for involving the migrants, but in this case, it's also, we suggested also to use the method of the deliberative democracy in order to increase the mutual understanding and trust between locals who are living in the territory and the immigrants, in order to create a dialogue and a mutual knowledge and overcoming stereotypes or fears that are understandable under certain restraint, and to overcome these limitations. So next slides, please. Actually, you will see from the recommendation that are coming from the next slides that are, yes, they are coming from case studies. And you see that it's very important to understand the migrants' profile, the skills that they have. When I'm speaking about skills, I'm speaking about different kinds of skills. This connected to their own educational level, but also about their own job skills, and even about their own cultural and emotional skills that they have in some way constructed during the period of their own long way to join the area of Europe, or even the area of Southeast Europe, because we have to consider that in the Adriatic Ionian macro-region, at least 4 or 5 countries are not yet within the European Union. Actually, they are candidate countries or potential candidate countries, but they are still not within the Union. And this explains also why very often the data were not compatible with each other, and why it was important to develop a strategy, because this is a region that deeply influenced our stability and security, I mean, as a European Union. As you can see in the next slides, we have also emphasized some of the latest developments that we have just analyzed once our project was already over, because what we can see is that substantially, despite of the fact that we ended our project in 2018, nothing significant has been changed so far. We have still thousands of migrants, particularly in they found new routes within the Balkans, involving also countries that originally were not involved in this mobility process. We have overcrowded camps in Bosnia and Herzegovina, for instance, in North Macedonia, like now Bihać, Velika Kladuša. In Greece, again, a lot of camps, Moria and others. So there is a state of emergency that is still existing, an approach of pushing back the migrants, and insecurity within the camps, insecurity that is connected also to the role of criminality in these unsettled conditions for the people that would like to join Europe, crossing the borders, so that you have also the intervention of the military, like for instance in Serbia, in Bosnia, or even in Croatia along the borders of Bosnia. And however, this means that within this context there are lots of differences, regional differences. We have still areas of Europe that are more attractive as destination, but the dynamic of mobility is likely to continue through the Mediterranean central route and the Balkan route. Next slide is the last one. So just concluding remarks, we want to emphasize that the mobility of migrants is intense and multi-directional, not necessarily goes in one direction, but they take a different approach and and consider different perspective. This is not just mobility that is connected to migration. We have to consider also the developments, people's mobility within the countries, the growing urbanization, the population of territories, the aging of population, which has an impact in consideration also of the fact that this kind of characteristic meet with the pressure that is coming from young people, mainly young people that are arriving from the migration flows. So there is an emergency that should be abandoned as such in order to treat the issue of the migrants as a long-term issue that requires a management that needs much more data than we have in this moment, and where we have to consider whether to what extent migration should be considered really a security threat or rather an opportunity, particularly for creating new conditions of balance and also of jobs within areas that need to be reconsidered under the framework of the territorial cohesion, which has been affected particularly by phenomena like the growing urbanization, the population, aging population, and so on and so forth. So what we in the end suggest is a more comprehensive approach that take into consideration also the development and the needs of the territorial cohesion in relation to the mobility of the population. Thank you for your attention.